Hi, Katie. Okay, so my goal in life is to stump you with questions, though that doesn't happen very often. You love Q&A because it makes you think on your feet. And I think you've said you don't usually get questions that you have not faced before. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's true. Every now and then, I remember this one kid did it to me like 6 months ago, though. I think he asked me to name all 12 disciples, and I was like, dang it. And I think I got 10 or something like that. But in the world of marriage and family, we've been doing this at Them Before Us for close to 8 years, formally. And before that, writing an awful lot. And it has allowed me to kind of investigate every corner of the conversation as it relates to marriage, family, parenthood, reproductive technologies. So hopefully we're in a position to be able to offer some kind of answer, at minimum, some kind of context for whatever it is that you're seeing in your world.
Yeah, I love that. Well, today I'm flipping the script a little bit because I have three, I would say maybe more objections that we've gotten in comments that we've of posts we've made recently. So I have three kind of big objections. I figure you and I going over these could help listeners engage and think through them a little bit when they see them, whether they're sharing something that we post or whether they're having a conversation with a friend. This can help them think through how would they answer these questions. So the first one, this is pretty common. I think a lot of people face this when we talk about pro life issues. But Katie, how would you answer the question of when a fetus or an embryo becomes a person? Is it at implantation? Is it at conception? Is it at birth? Do they lose personhood at some point? What do you think?
All right, so I don't feel like I'm the expert on this. I think people like Scott Klusendorf have done a really good job of laying out a logical case to respond to these kinds of questions. But I'll tell you from the children's rights perspective how you need to address this. Life begins at conception. Whether or not that happens in the womb or in the laboratory, life begins at conception. It is when the sperm and egg meet, fuse together, that a new genetic person exists. That is when a distinct chromosomal code is created that is unlike any other human that's ever lived and any other human that will come into being. Now, it is very hard to refute the conclusion that life begins at conception. It is largely agreed on by the majority of embryologists that this is when life begins. And as you often say, Jen, it's very clearly a human life. It's not a little armadillo life. It's not a caterpillar life. It is a human life. So it's clear that this is a human life that begins at the moment of conception. Now, that is an inconvenient answer for people that want to promote abortion and people that want to promote IVF and people that want to, promote Plan B and things like that. All of these different um, technologies that either force children out of existence or force children into existence. Because if life begins at conception, then that has some kind of distinct moral value to it. So while they cannot refute that this is a human life from the moment of conception, there are some sort of dirty tricks that some ethicists or maybe even some progressive activists will try to employ by acknowledging this is a human life, but it's not necessarily a person. Personhood comes from something else. Personhood is only granted when you're sentient, like when you can think clearly, or personhood is only granted once you're not completely reliant on your mother for support, or personhood only happens upon implantation, not conception. And so what this does is anytime you separate being human from being a person, and personhood is where in their mind, well, that's when you have human rights, is when you're a person. But if you're not a person, then you don't have human rights. Let's just look at some of the ways that we have tried to decouple being a human and being a person throughout history. The Nazis did it. They're like, well, Jews are obviously human, but are they really people? They're really subhuman, aren't they? And that's exactly what happened in the arguments around slavery. Well, you couldn't deny that these were humans, but they were really ape-like humans, right? These Black people coming from another continent, they're not persons in the way that we are. They're human, but they're not persons. And because they're not persons, we can enslave them, we can trade them, we can subjugate them. They actually love being slaves. They're wired to be slaves. They're genetically made to be slaves. And so I just think that when you are trying to separate human from person, you're on the path to genocide. You're on the path to commodification. You're on the path to rampant human rights violations. So the answer is you are human from the moment of conception, and you are a person from the moment of conception. And because that is true, we cannot commodify, we cannot enslave, and we cannot eradicate human life.
If people want to use thinking clearly or not being dependent on mom as a criteria for personhood, we're looking at like 25-year-olds at this point, right? Prefrontal cortex fully developed, not on your parents' insurance anymore. People will say, a baby is a human or deserves life when they're not dependent on mom anymore. And I'm thinking maybe a 6-year-old in an unhealthy way could be left home alone and figure out the cabinets and get into the fridge and feed themselves. But we're not talking about a newborn. A newborn is completely dependent on someone to take care of them. And like you said, you really cannot split human from person ever. It doesn't make sense. Personhood isn't something you can study in a lab. It's not something, it's sort of a metaphysical, philosophical understanding of humanity. So if humans cannot have human rights, then we have some big problems, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because if dependency is the criteria for personhood, that is just a prescription to eliminate the undesirables. I mean, kids are at risk there, but so are the elderly and so are the disabled. I mean, the truth is that the nature of being human is to be dependent. We are dependent, especially at both poles of the human existence, when we're very young and we're very, very old. It's important that we Christians continue to hold on to this unbending, unwavering definition of when life begins, and that personhood and humanity always goes together. Because if we don't, we are going to see, and we have seen, and we will continue to see rampant victimization and violation of human rights.